to this week's Dux Soup webinar. In this webinar, Giles Garnett, the head of professional services, will teach you how to use Revisit Data tool, uploading your own lists to Dux Soup. Live chat is being monitored by me, Jen, the head of customer support, and at the end of the webinar, Giles will be answering to your questions that you will have during the webinar. So thank you for joining us today, and let's start.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to everyone joining today's Dux Soup webinar, be that whether you're watching it live or via the recording, of course. Before anyone asks, of course, this webinar will be recorded, and the link will be posted on the website later today or tomorrow morning, and will be available to everyone who has registered, and indeed anybody who checks on the website. But the people who've registered will get the link. Firstly, to introduce myself to anyone who is new to these webinars or indeed Dux Soup. My name is Giles Garnett, and I'm head of professional services here at Dux Soup. I present the product webinars every couple of weeks, and I also run the booster and technical calls if you need additional assistance. So for today's webinar topic, we are going to be focusing on how and when should I use the Dux Soup revisit function. Now, last week, no, not last week, 2 weeks ago, we focused on our Turbo users with an integration with Google Sheets. Apologies, I'm talking too fast this afternoon. And this time we're looking at the functionalities that is available to both Pro and Turbo users with the revisit functionality. And we'll be showing how you can make the best use of this particular function. Now, a couple of months ago, we ran a webinar and, of course, published an associated blog which focused on searching and filtering, which shows you how to narrow down your LinkedIn search criteria to the right area and therefore find the right data. Now, when it comes to today's topic, what we're looking at is how we can best use that data. And so today's aim will be to understand the process of carrying out what we call a revisit. Understand why you might want to use this functionality. We'll touch very briefly upon the difference between scanning and visiting, and then how you can make the most out of the scanning, the revisiting, and the message customization. We will also touch upon how you can build your own custom files for revisiting. So there's going to be quite a lot of bits and pieces we'll cover during the webinar, and I'll start off with sort of 4 or 5 slides, and then the rest of it will be a live demo. Hopefully everything will work, and yeah, we'll see how we go. So there could be a number of scenarios as to why you might want to use the revisit function. So if you want to validate your data before you head out and visit a message list of prospects, so you might want to remove some from your list, the best way to do this would be to add an extra step to your process and carry out what we call a scan of your list or results, and then use the Dux Soup revisit functionality for further engagement. I'll go into all of this in the demo shortly. So what sort of scenarios would you want to do this? So perhaps when you're engaging with your first degree connections. Now, your first degree list may contain, for example, family, friends, colleagues who you don't want to send automated message to. So how do you most simply manage this? So first of all, you could, for example, scan your list of first degree connections, download that, edit that list according to who you want to reach out to, and then upload that list back into Dux Soup, making use of the revisit tool. With regard to your first degree connections, you could also, of course, endorse your connections during an auto visit. That is a functionality that's only available in standard LinkedIn. It's not a function that's available within Sales Navigated. You can tag profiles, that's Dux Soup tags. You could auto message, as I've just mentioned, and you could also even, if you wanted to, disconnect from profiles. I've had a few customers who have in excess of 25,000 connections and are looking to purge their first degree connections so that they can grow with different personas within their network. So second and third degree connections, potentially, you could scan a list of second and third degree connections, validate that list, and then carry out auto visits to either outreach and connect to those people, or even to make use of the Dux points facility and try and collect email addresses from those second and third degree connections. That function is available to all paid versions of Dux Soup, and yeah, you would need Dux Soup points in order to do that as well. And then, of course, you have the ability to customize your messages even further if you use the revisit function. So as most of you are probably aware, when you're sending out a message, we have markers available. So first name, last name, etc., etc. If you're using the scan and revisit tool, you have the possibility to add additional levels of customization to your messages. And we'll come into that in a lot more detail a little bit later on during the demonstration. But you could perhaps make it easier, therefore, using other tools, which we'll come on to later as well, the gender API tool, for example, to automatically change the salutation or the way that you message different genders, so male and female. In different languages, you often need to, your sentence construction needs to be somewhat different. So using these sorts of tools, you can have that extra level of customization in your messages. So what is scanning? So scanning is an action that you can request Dux Soup to carry out on your behalf. And you can ask Dux Soup to scan any list that you find within LinkedIn. It's a quick option to retrieve data from a profile that appears on a list and is able to receive data such as first name, last name, title, location, and most importantly, the URL of the LinkedIn profile. If you have the URL, then you can get Dux Soup, the Dux Soup robot to revisit that profile later. And you can always tell whether you are able to run any of the automation with Dux Soup, because the Dux Soup icon turns green when it recognizes what we call a list in LinkedIn or within the revisit tool. Scan data is downloadable and is available separately from your visit data. And you know, don't forget, you can scan as many pages as you want today, as the robot is purely scrolling through your list of search results. You are not actually clicking on any profiles. So this is what we're going to demonstrate today. We're going to show you how to scan different lists. So that'll be first degree, second, third degree, etc., etc. How to download your scanned data, how to revisit and carry out automated activities on any list, how to add custom fields to your messages, and then make use of Gender API to customize your messages even further. So that's what we're going to cover in the demo. I'll try not to go too quickly. Hopefully the screen resolution and clarity will remain good enough for everybody, and I'll try to remember to zoom in as much as possible. So let's kick off with scanning some different lists. So first of all, I'm going to go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm zoomed into 150%, so hopefully everyone can see this. If I now go to my network here and I go to my first degree connections, we have here a list of connections. And one of the problems with this page is that this is an infinitely loading page within LinkedIn. So it's always best, if you're trying to gather data from your first degree connections, to actually view this through the search results. Because if you go through the search results, you then actually get it broken down into a number of pages. So here I have just under 1,000. You can also carry this search out, for example, in Sales Navigator. It's exactly the same process. But what you could do here is carry out some sort of filtered list of your, carry out some sort of search within your first degree connections to then scan it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go to my Dux Soup icon. Before I do anything else, I'm going to clear data. So I get rid of everything that I've got cached in my browser and actually start off with 0. And what I will do now, you can see that the Dux Soup icon has turned green. Dux Soup is ready for action. And I have the options, of course, the visit and connect. But then this is the one here that we're going to focus on, the scan profiles. If I click the scan profiles button, what we'll see is the Dux Soup will reload the page and it will start to skim off high-level data against this list. And this will go fairly quickly. It scans, I think I have it set up to scan at 10 pages per minute. It'll scroll through this list fairly quickly. And then this is Dux Soup automatically scrolling down. In a second, it will then flick to the next page. And then if I left it to run, it would go all the way through to the end of my first degree connections. And this way we can actually sort of gather some information, sort of build our own database of who is a first degree connection, who I'm connected with. So we've got some data here. We'll just leave it there for now. There we are. We've got 20 results. So I'm now going to stop the robot there. Just let that finish a second. And now in order to do something with that data, we now need to download that data. So if I again press on my Dux Soup icon, I get this little button here under my options, which says download data. And if I press on that button there, I have the option to download either my scan data or my visit data. So a visit is when you actually physically open a profile, of course, and you get a lot more data there. But with scan data, we get some high level data, which we can then do something with later. So if I click on the scan data button, that creates me a CSV file here in the bottom left-hand corner, which I can then open. And then I think I probably need to zoom in a little bit, probably, so that everybody can see this clearly. So we zoom into 150%. And here we go. We have here some high-level data against those profiles, those first 20 profiles that I scanned. And these are all first degree connections of mine. So we have here the time that I've scanned the profile. I have the URL of the profile that I've scanned. I have first name, last name, job title, location, and any notes. So you can see here that we now have some data that we can do something with. And these are first degree connections, of course. So what I could do now is I could use the revisit function to process this list. Of course, if I had my entire list of first degree connections, I would probably then want to, for example, if I'm sending some sorts of outreach to them, I would want to edit this list to some degree. So say, for example, I wanted to send out a marketing message to the first 10 people on this list. I would delete the people I didn't want to send my list to. I've still got all the data in here that I require in order to carry out a revisit. I would save this file, and it has to remain as a CSV file for it to work within Dux Soup. I will now close that file. And in order to make use of the revisit tool, I click on my Dux Soup icon, and down in the bottom left-hand corner of the drop-down box here, you see the revisit data button. If I click on that button there, I can now upload my CSV file to here. So the one that I just did there, my scan data from just a few minutes ago. And there we are. There's the 10 profiles that I would now like to ask Dux Soup to revisit on my behalf. Now, because these are first degree connections, of course, I have a number of different options. And what I could do here is I could then go to my Dux Soup options. We'll make sure we're zoomed in enough so everyone can see here. And then I could decide what I wanted to do with my automated actions. So perhaps that would be to send a personalized message to my first degree connections. Perhaps I would just want to follow these profiles. Maybe I'd like to disconnect from these profiles. That's also something that I could do. Or indeed, because I'm doing this with the standard LinkedIn URLs, I could also endorse these people with my choice of 1, 3, or 5 of their skills, their first degree connections. So I can do that, and I'm doing it in standard LinkedIn. As I said earlier, that functionality just does not work in Sales Navigator. I could also choose to tag these profiles with an auto tag when I'm carrying out my auto visits. And what I would do is, when I've decided exactly what I wanted to do, so tend to send a message and maybe tag and endorse, I would then go back to my revisit tool here. Dux Soup recognizes this as a list it can process. I would click on my Dux Soup icon and I would visit these profiles. And as per all normal Dux Soup activities, Dux Soup would then just work its way through this list until it reached the end, based upon, of course, all the throttling, planning, etc. Rules that you've set up previously. So that's how you can do that with first degree connections. Now you can do exactly the same process with second and third degree connections as well. So I'll close this down a second and we'll go back to LinkedIn. So if, for example, I wanted to carry out a search within LinkedIn, let's just go back here and let's search for operations manager in Dux Soup, in LinkedIn. And we want to look for people. You come up then with a rather large result, which is not particularly useful, of course. Remember the limitations. You only see 1,000 results when you're working in standard LinkedIn. You see 2,500 results if you're working in Sales Navigator. Let's narrow this down a little bit to get a result that is actually useful. Still got 13,000 results. Okay, let's just look for people who are working at KPN for now, just for the test. There we go. So we've now got 209 results here. I'm only looking at second degree connections here. And once again, I could now ask Dux Soup, because it's turned green, it's recognized this as a list. I could now ask Dux Soup to scan these profiles so I could then carry out a visit to these people. And what I'll do is I'll scan this list as well now. So again, we've got some more data to play with a little bit later, so I can show you a few more interesting functions that we can use against this. So we'll just wait for this to gather some data. You can see that it scrolls through the pages fairly quickly and picks up the data fairly quickly. I didn't clear the data from my first degree connections, but that's okay, because I basically want to get some data here to show you some of the other functionality later. We'll just wait for this to scroll through to the next page. Shouldn't take too long. Well, there we go. We've got a little bit more data there now. Okay. Right, we'll stop the robot there. Now, of course, you can do this with any list in LinkedIn. And just to illustrate that as well, so if, for example, you'd wanted to now use that list, you could use exactly the same process as I did with first degree connections to then go and revisit and then visit and connect to those profiles. But another thing you need to that's worth remembering is that you can, so I say, do this with any list. So, for example, if we find an article that a number of people have reacted to, and you're like, yeah, that's a particularly pertinent article, and I would therefore like to be able to see who's reacted to this article and reach out to these people. So we can see here we have a business here that has a post, and we've got 36 people have reacted to that post. If I click on that number 36 there, Dux Soup recognizes this as a list, and I can also, for example, ask Dux Soup to scan this list as well. If I press the scan button, once again, Dux Soup will just scan this list as it did with the other lists previously, your first degree connections, your second or third degree connections. All of these are different ways of gathering data out of LinkedIn and being able to do something with it later. So we'll stop the robot there a second, and then we'll go back and show you some more bits and pieces. So we've now got 50 profiles that we've gathered in scanning. I'm now going to download that data again. So again, we'll gather our scan data. And this is a real mix now of people who are first degree connections, people I found in a search result, people who had reacted to an article. And if I open this profile now, you'll see it's, again, I'll need to zoom in, I think. Let's just do that a second. So hopefully you can see this clearly. And you can see here, I have those same columns here. So you can do this in Sales Navigator as well. So the columns that we have, just for explanation, the ID is the unique database ID number of the user within the LinkedIn database. The time that I've scanned is self-explanatory. URL of the profile, first name, last name, title, location, etc., etc. So you can see here I scanned a number with my first degree connections at 16 minutes past 5. I scanned a number of people who were in the search results, and then I've got here these people here who've reacted to a post that I found. So I've got a number of different bits of data here now. And what I might want to do is I now might want to go out and ask the robots to revisit these people, but I want to use some sort of customization in my message. And what I can do with customization, if we go back to our Dux Soup options a moment, let's go back here. We'll go back to our Dux Soup options just up here. Now, what we have with messaging, and this counts for both our connection messages, connection request messages, and also for our first degree messages, we have the standard markers, the first name, the middle name, last name, etc., etc. But we also have the option to add other columns, P1, P2, P3, P4, and P5. And these are values that you can put into your CSV file and use within your messaging. So in order to illustrate that, we go back here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to insert a couple of new columns within my CSV file. And I'm going to call them P1, 2. And what I can do here is I can put in some text within those particular columns, and I can use those markers within my messaging. So if I now save this as a CSV file again, exactly the same process as before, I've just put some test text in there. You, of course, would maybe want to put in the name of the person whose article you're linking to. For example, I saw you had reacted to an article by XYZ and thought it would be nice to connect. It's all about finding a way to make a connection, and this sort of personalization of message can make that much more possible, much more likely. So I've added my extra columns, I've put extra text in there. I will now close that. We'll go back to our Dux Soup. We'll go back to LinkedIn first, and we'll go to our Dux Soup icon. Once again, we'll go to our revisit data button. We'll re-upload our new scan data file. And what you can see now is you have these extra text columns populated, and you could then use these P1, P2 markers in your messaging. And you can do that with your connection request messages and indeed your outreach messages to your existing first degree connections. Now we can also take this a step further. And what we're going to do now is I would like to show you how to use this in conjunction with Gender API. So what we can do now is let's download my data once again. So it's a clean set of data. Once again, we'll just download the scan data here. And what we have here is, as before, we've just got our scan data. It's exactly the same data as we had before. But what I'm going to do with this file this time is I'm going to upload this file into Gender API, ask it to look at the first name column and determine whether this is a male or a female profile. Of course, you don't enter your gender within LinkedIn. It's a gender neutral environment. So if you go to Gender API, free accounts are available here. You can, I think there's a trial account. There's also a free account which has so many credits per month. And if I go here to my account, and if I upload a CSV file, so I go to here to upload my CSV file, I'm now going to browse to my file. Let's go to, here we go. I need to go to all files, and it's the latest one I've just created. I open that, and what it now asks for is it looks for the first name or email address column. So I'm going to put in the first name, and then if you've got it, you can add a country column as well, because of course that can help determine the gender related to a name. So what we can do here now is I can press the review your data button, so it can see here, it's going to look through these names. It's going to look through each of these names and tell me here, is it male or female? So I'm okay with that. That looks good. I'm going to say, please process that file. Gender API will then take that entire file and it will create my new file for me. And I will now ask to download the file. There we go. And that's created me a new CSV file, which will open, and we'll zoom in so that we can see exactly what additional data we now have and what we can do with that. So there we go. So we now have these same 50 profiles, or 49 profiles, I think it is, 50 profiles. Exactly the same data as before, the ID, the scan time, the profile URL, first name, last name, etc., etc. But it's now given me 3 additional columns. So I've got here the gender that the API believes it is, the accuracy of that calculation based upon previous data that it's gathered over the years, and then the number of samples that is based upon. So you can see here, most of these are a high 90% probability. There's 1 or 2 that are a little bit lower that you might want to go and check out. But there's a very, very good level of likelihood that there's a high level accuracy there. Now, if you wanted to then customize your salutation here, for example, I'm going to put in a new a new bit of data here. I'm just going to call this sample text, and I'm going to have here just Mr. and Ms. So I want to be able to have a custom field within my revisit data, which then picks out whether it's a male or a female within my messaging. So in order to do that, I then, of course, need to insert my new custom message column here. So I'll call that P1. And I need to remember where this is. So that's in cell P2 and cell P3. All right, okay. Let's just do that a second. Right, and now all I need to do is ask Excel to look at this cell here, and then that will help determine which salutation will be applied to this particular profile. So if I just use the if command within Excel, if in this case L2 equals, in this case I will do, I think I've done it on male and female. So let's do if it equals male, then we want to go to cell P2. Oh no, P. Excuse me, it's taking a little bit of time to type. And if it's not male, then we want it to go to cell P3. I think that's correct. I hope that's correct. And there we go. So now that is now going to dynamically calculate whether it's male or female according to the criteria that I've set. If I now copy and paste that all the way down my list, it will automatically look at each line and change the salutation accordingly. All I need to do now is save this file as a CSV file. If I now close this and then go back to my Dux Soup revisit options here, if I now revisit my data, go here, we'll go to the last one, should be the most recently, and there we go. We can see now that my P1 is according to the gender. I've not checked every line. Of course, you might want to go through and check to see where the most probables are, and maybe just double check any of those that are under maybe 80% likelihood. I can now use these salutations customized according to gender for each of the people that I would like to revisit. Now, of course, if this was a list of second and third degree connections, I would then ask Dux Soup to go and visit and connect to these people, of course, having configured my automated messaging. But that's how you can make use of functionalities such as Gender API in order to populate and complement and customize your messaging accordingly. I know certain languages this has a greater impact than in others. Certainly in English, it's not such an issue, but I'm very aware that for example, in Germany, there are issues with regards the way that you address different genders. So that's mostly what I wanted to cover. I think the one thing I've not talked about is custom files, creating custom files. If I just open an Excel spreadsheet a second and just create a new sheet here, basically the three columns that you require in order to create your own custom file are the URL. I better zoom in a second as well, otherwise you guys probably can't see this. It's 150. No, I've just realized I need to probably create a new. Let's create a new spreadsheet. There we go. There we go. View, zoom. Go to 150. There we go. And what you need here is you need the URL column. You need first name. And you need last name. So this is how you would create your custom file. Of course, you could of course add your own P1, P2 columns in as well. But this is the base data that you would need. So if I just take some data from another one, so we'll just take the URL, first name and last name from a few people here. We'll copy and paste that into here to create our new file. And what we'll do is we will save this as, we need to save this as a CSV file in order for it to work. We'll just call this test. We'll save that. There we are. So we've saved this as our test file, our custom test file. We've got the URL, we've got the first name, and we've got the last name. What we can do now, let's save that. We can now go to our Dux Soup options. We'll close that one down. And once again, we will go to the revisit data button. We'll choose to upload our test file. And you can see here, it's got the people who I've identified there. It hasn't got the URL on there, but it's identified that because it's got each of these URLs have been identified. So because you've got the URL in there, it will identify each of those as a profile that it can visit.
Typo in the URL.
Oh, was
it
that
has to be profile. Yeah.
Oh, it needs
Sorry.
to be profile. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
I thought I'd missed something out there. Let's go back and do that again. So it needs to be profile in the first column. There we go. Thank you for your interjection there, Jin, putting me on the straight and narrow. Excellent. There we go. We'll call profile, first name, last name. Let's try that again. And revisit data. And we'll go to our test file again. And as if by magic, there we are. The profile URL appears, first name and last name. And again, yeah, you could also add your your extra customization columns there as well, of course. But that's how you would create your custom files as well. So if I just go back to the slides very quickly, I'm just aware of the time. So we've gone through how to scan different lists, first degree, second, third degree, people who've reacted to posts. You could do it with alumni lists, employee lists, any list of people you find in LinkedIn. How to download your scanned data, how to revisit and carry out automated activities on any list, how to add custom fields to your messages, and then also there, how to create custom files, and also how to make use of Gender API to customize your messages even further. If you're processing lists of 1,000 or 2,000 people, then of course, having that happen automatically is incredibly valuable. That's everything I wanted to cover today. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to be looking at making use of the Dux Soup API. It's an advanced topic. So yeah, that's what I'll be presenting in 2 weeks' time. All of our previous webinars, of course, are available via the website and associated blogs. There are many slots available for booster and technical calls if required. So the booster calls are very much focused on the pro users, those who are starting out, getting used to the software, understanding the functionality, getting you up and running. The technical calls are very much more based upon the sort of the Turbo product, the follow-up messages, the Zapier, Integromat integrations, and even the Google Sheets integrations as well. So that's how we have those set up at the moment. There are some useful links here, as always: the homepage, the blogs, our suggestion pages, webinars, tutorials, our support team, which is of course headed up by Jin, and our very active Facebook community. And last but not least, if there's anybody still there, are there any questions, Jin?
And it seems that no one has any questions.
Well, none that you've not been able to answer anyway.
Thank you.
All right. I thank you, everybody, for hanging around and listening to our webinar today. And I'll let Jin sign off, and I'll speak to you again in 2 weeks.
See you very soon. Enjoy your day.